Adventures in Venture.
I can't fucking do that. Okay. I thought it was some audio thing. Do I just start? Is that what it is? Okay. Hi, I'm Evan Maindonald, and this is Adventures in Venture. My guest today is Adeo Ressi. Adeo is a legendary figure in the Silicon Valley tech industry and startup world. He's the co-founder and chairman of the Founder Institute, an early-stage startup accelerator. He's also the founder and CEO of VC Lab, an accelerator for venture capital firms. He's incredibly well connected in Silicon Valley. He's a good friend of Elon Musk's and is personally connected to investors, luminaries, and VCs like Steve Jurvetson, Roloff Botha, Peter Diamandis, Jason Calacanis, Tim Draper, and many, many more. Adeo, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Anything you'd like to add to my introduction?
I mean, it's simple, but to the point. I was on the board of the X Prize for many years. That's how I know Peter really well. We recruited people like Larry Page and Sergey Brin to the board as well, and many other luminaries that you didn't mention. So, I've been around the block for a long time.
So, in a way, compared to some of those names which people know really well, it sort of feels to me a little bit like you fly under the radar. You kind of keep a little bit almost too quiet.
Yeah, I don't think profile is a mixed blessing, right? Because you can be really profile with lots of money like Elon, and he lives a pretty difficult life. He can't really go anywhere. He can't really do anything. So all that profile doesn't necessarily help that much. If anything, it makes him more unhappy because he has to live like a hermit and work all the time because he can't go to a restaurant or dinner or a movie or anything like that. And so, there's some times in life where profile can help, but for the most part, I find that it can help. And then there's another issue in that if you get really high profile and people assume that you're top of the game, best in class, then they want to take you down, right? They're like, I want that person to fail or fall because he or she is the top dog. And they have this zero-sum game mentality where if they're the top person, or if someone else is the top person, they can't be the top person. So all guns are pointed at you. So I prefer generally to do a lot of important work, but do it behind the scenes, not in the spotlight.
Okay. Yeah, well, and there is a bit of that tall poppy syndrome. People see the one that's sticking up, they want to cut it off. So yeah, maybe that's a better way to get things done. So Adeo, what I want to do today is get under the skin of who you are and understand what drives you. You're clearly on a mission to transform the world of venture capital and the startup investment landscape. What I'd like you to do is explain where this came from, the early experiences that drive what you do now.
Yeah, so I've had concerns about the world since I was young. It started when I was maybe 17, 18 years old, and we're sort of in the midst of this Cold War. And it really made no sense to me why we had all these nuclear weapons that could blow the planet up many times over in the hands of two nation states that were pursuing this deterrence strategy. That seemed ridiculous. And so from an early age, I was really set on what are some things that we can do to make the world a better place. And I've tried a lot of things, and honestly, I can't say that they've worked very well. And it doesn't mean that they have been very successful, but they haven't necessarily made the world a better place. So like the internet's a great example. So I originally was super passionate about the internet. I started the first company that had stuff on the World Wide Web, because when the World Wide Web came out, there were researchers like Mark Andreessen, who created one of the first web browser, and Tim Berners-Lee that produced papers and put them out. But there were no companies publishing actual materials on the World Wide Web, on FTP, on Gopher, etc. So we had a dedicated company that was producing content for the internet. Turns out we had the first website by such a company. And then I really worked to spread the internet to companies, etc., in those early years. And the belief behind it was you had all this centralized media that was essentially engaging in a form of mind control. Because if you read it in the newspaper, you believed it to be true. As we know today, a lot of stuff in the newspapers that are written are not true, and it forms your worldview. So I wanted everyone really to have a say in what comprised the worldview of people. And the best way to do that was to create a many-to-many infrastructure, aka the internet, versus this one-to-many world that we lived in beforehand with cable networks, television networks, print media, whether it be newspapers, magazines, etc. And I think there's a lot of truth to what happened in terms of, allowing this many-to-many collaboration to happen. But there's also a lot of dark sides that came out of it as well. A lot of children are unhappier as a result of the internet and mobile phone use. A lot of cyberbullying and abuse goes on across the networks. So it's taken many of the good things and improved societies in many ways, but it's also amplified many of the bad things and added some new bad things as well. So, I would say I'm kind of 50-50 on the internet. And I think if you look at a lot of the different things that are happening right now, you could have, on one hand, a lot of excitement about what's going on, but there's also a lot of reason to be cautious. And, AI would be top of the list. But just to go back, so I've been working on proactively initiatives to make the world a better place since, my late teens. And I really believe that working on venture capital and entrepreneurship is the penultimate opportunity to fix things. Because the idea that a small group of people can fix the entire world is an implausible concept, right? It has to be a lot of people working together on meaningful projects to actually have an impact. The challenge is who controls that type of volume of people? Well, governments, but they've completely failed at this initiative. NGOs and similar organizations like the United Nations, they've also failed pretty miserably. So I've decided to take more of a grassroots approach where you empower, thousands and thousands of entrepreneurs around the world. And then you empower thousands and thousands of investors around the world to back those entrepreneurs. And then together they can really have a massive positive impact as long as they're working on ethical, moral, and important things.
So it sounds to me like you're a great proponent of liberty in general. And I agree with you about the impact of the internet on the media sector. We certainly were in an era where the things that people got to hear were dominated by, say, corporate interests or and we, certainly social media and the internet have enabled us to talk more freely, although, we've probably gone too far in a way on that scale. Now the question is what's real and what's not, and whether people have to be a lot more selective with the information that they consume. But what's interesting for me is that you're also clearly a great believer in free markets and the power of free markets to actually drive change and drive positive change if they're used in the right way. But I think there may also be something underpinning where you're going, which is around some of your earlier experiences in entrepreneurship. You mentioned the web company. I know that you were also involved with a company called Game Trust between 2002 and 2006, and I believe Elon Musk was also involved with that company, and that you had quite a bad experience with investors, which drove you to actually start trying to hold the venture capital industry to account. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, so maybe what I'll do is I'll talk about that in a second, because I've done a lot of different things, and I'll outline what they are, and then that's one of them, and I'll outline what the effects are.
And I'm particularly interested in how that's led to what you're doing today, though, Adeo.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So the internet was really my first big initiative to try and, create a different outcome for humanity where there were lots of voices, as we discussed. Then, that went okay, I had pro and con. I also worked extensively on space because I figured that if there was some really big human achievement, like colonizing Mars, that would bring humanity together and like this great kind of upwelling of we can do anything. You brought up gaming. I also felt that we could achieve a certain meta consciousness in the gaming world. So I worked on gaming for a while. And then through gaming, it came to my attention that no matter what you do, no matter how good you are, at some point you're going to need to raise money. And the people who are controlling that money, for the most part, were largely homogeneous, largely constrained geographically in a small number of places, and frankly, often not with any good values or morals. So it was a really problematic situation, because even if you had the best idea, even if you had all the right intentions and everything else, you were stepping into a cesspool to get capital in order to make that happen. And a lot of times the presence of the capital was problematic and might cause you to fail because they would put unfair, unrealistic terms, too many expectations, etc. So the gaming thing led me really to work on both the investment side, but also the entrepreneurship side, because one of the things that became clear to me when I was doing the gaming company is there was this kind of unhealthy dynamic between entrepreneurs and investors, where investors would say, hey, the next hot thing is insert whatever it is, AI. Back then, gaming was hot, etc. So at any time, there's a bunch of trends.
Yep.
A lot of that is driven by money. And then tons of entrepreneurs go out and pursue those trends with startup ideas. And many of those startup ideas aren't very good because the entrepreneurs don't really care about the idea. They care about getting the money from investors. So they sort of do the hot thing of the day versus the right thing for them, the right thing for society, etc. So I really set out on a mission to say, okay, first and foremost, we got to fix entrepreneurship so that entrepreneurs aren't running around chasing things that VCs say are hot, and they're actually working on things that they believe in. And then secondly, you've got to fix the venture capitalists to fund entrepreneurs that are working on meaningful things rather than entrepreneurs that are working on the next, sexy idea or industry like AI.
So I guess initially your frame of reference for, these issues was actually the US. So you were looking at US startups and US venture capital at that point.
Well, okay.
These problems exist. I guess what I'm saying is these problems existed in the US. That's where,
look, the reality is that in 2006, when I started really kind of looking deeply at the venture industry and how broken it was, the venture industry was 60 to 70% in the US. So 30-ish% of all money that went into startups was outside of the US, and all of the rest of it was in the US. And so per capita, all this stuff, the US just dominated the venture capital industry. The interesting thing is, you might think that, okay, as those numbers changed, and today the U.S. is below 50%. I think it's in the 40% range. But as those numbers changed, you might think that these other countries that have been growing their venture capital ecosystems would have, more diversity, better ethics and the like. And in fact, what ended up happening is most of the world until recently really just copied the US. And so you have largely male dominated, again, very consolidated in small regions, unethical behavior and the like, everywhere in the world, not just the US, because it wasn't only the model that spread, it was also the culture. And so that set off pretty big alarm bells for me on a number of different levels. And the story of how VC Lab got started. So I'm always trying to look at ways to make the world a better place. If I don't really care that much about money, obviously I'm not totally separated from the idea that, I'm not one of these people that's like, we can only do good in the world and not make money. I actually am 100% confident that the better that you do in the world, the more money you will make, right? And they're not they can be mutually exclusive, right? You can do a lot of good in the world and make no money, but they don't have to be mutually exclusive. That's just a perception that you have that could be totally wrong, right? My perception is you can do lots of good in the world and make lots of money. And a simple case in point is, the success of Tesla, where Elon's made most of his money. And the reality is that, it's doing a lot of good in the world. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, I think it does seem to be the case that where people follow a passion, a really strong passion, and they pursue that and I guess if we talk about founder problem fit for a startup, usually you're looking for somebody who's got a really strong passion about something. And if that's what they're driving after, then generally speaking, the money follows. So I think,
not if you're a woman or a minority. It really doesn't matter how passionate you are. You're going to get a lot less opportunities to get money. So if you happen to be a, white male pretty much anywhere in the world, your likelihood to get venture capital is a massive multiple over people who are neither white nor male, right? So, I wish that statement were true, but it's just not true. And plus, if you're in even some geographies like Central Asia, parts of Africa, the probability that you're going to be able to raise venture capital regardless of gender and race are even lower. So this needs to be fixed. The problems we're facing. Let's take a pause. Okay. The world's in deep trouble. Okay. The world is in serious, deep trouble. We are like up to our shoulders in quicksand, and it's fast moving to chin level. Okay. So when I was younger, I saw that, hey, all these trend lines are going in the wrong direction. I studied architecture, environmental science, and all this stuff in college. And I was like, whoa, trend lines don't look good. The Aral Sea is drying up. All this stuff is happening, and it's not going to be good for this planet. And the thing is, at that point, I was pretty worried. And that was like 30 something years ago. I graduated around 30 years ago, 28 years ago to 32 years ago. Right. And it's not a linear, it's a geometric problem we have right now. And so actually it looks more like the power law. We're in like serious, serious trouble right now as a planet, as a species. And nobody seems to really care. And for a long time, I do this, I do that. And I'd be like a little like, why isn't anyone else doing anything? Why doesn't anyone else care? And now I'm just at the point where I just have to go do it. We have to go do it. There's no more time. We have to literally like burn the ships, burn the bridges, right? Salt the earth, We need to just like if the world's on fire, like drop what you're doing and run and put it out. Now, I understand that not everyone feels the way that I do, and that's okay. I don't care if you feel the way that I do, but I'm going to put the fire out one way or another. So mark my words, I will put the fire out. Now, it's great to have other people to help. I am not saying that I can do it alone, but at this point, it just needs to happen and someone's got to do it. And the politicians are talking about it. Fire's not going out. The companies are talking about it. Fire's not going out, right? The NGOs are talking about it. The charities are talking about it. The endowments are talking about it. Fire's not going out. All right. It's getting worse, right? Because it's all talk. So I'm going to take action. I'm all action and not talk. And if you opened and asked like, hey, you know, why are you maybe not as high profile as so-and-so or whatever? Profile isn't going to put the fire out, right? If I thought having a high profile would put the fire out, I'd be as high profile as you could possibly imagine, but it's not going to put the fire out. It's just going to distract me from putting the fire out. So the things that put the fire out right now are dollars on real problems. And so how do you do that? How do you get real dollars into real problems? Well, first of all, you have to have real humans working on those problems. And you know who those are? Entrepreneurs. It's not governments. It's not NGOs. It's not nonprofits. They're doing something, but all of them have proven to be incredibly inefficient ways to do anything. Okay? Change a light bulb, whatever. You know, take 10 nonprofit people to change a light bulb. It takes one entrepreneur, right? They don't need to hire anyone.
That's certainly true.
Change the light bulbs
Entrepreneurs are good at getting things done. Yeah.
Entrepreneurs get things done. And here's the thing. They need money, right? If I'm going to go do something that captures carbon, that's a utility scale operation. I'm going to need utility scale financing to make that happen. Now, I maybe don't need all that financing right away. Maybe I need, 10 million to get started and then 30 million to build a plant. And then maybe I can go to a government and say, hey, I've got something that can pull, 100 tons of carbon out of the atmosphere. Let's share the burden, and you may give me this much money, go to another government, get money from them. But in order to get to that level where they can offer a solution to actually solve some of these problems, they're going to need funding. So that's sort of the two areas that I think can really move the needle right now are entrepreneurs working on things that matter and venture capitalists funding those entrepreneurs working on things that matter with real money, right? And I'll tell you how I think about real money. I think that everyone with money right now needs to take 20% of what they have and put it towards things that matter immediately. Immediately. Climate tech and climate change solutions. There's a whole bunch of meaningful area. There's diversity issues, right? Because we have a lot of racism still built in the world, which is just insane. And I can go on. There's a biotech enhancements that we need. We need food tech enhancements. If we actually put real money towards these innovations, I think we can get that 2030 mark of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. That's not enough. At this point, if we hit that, we're still in trouble because we've gone too far. So we actually have to be thinking about regenerative goals, not sustainable goals. So we got to change the dialogue a little bit. But I do think 2030 is the seminal year because given this hockey stick that we're on right now, if we can't slow it down or start reversing it, right? Sustainable is just not an option because we're going to sustain at a crazy rate? No. So we gotta be regenerative. We gotta call things back. We gotta calm things down. We gotta slow down. We gotta stop with these crazy plastics that we wrap every fucking thing, excuse my language, that we buy in plastic. It's insane. I don't need a pen wrapped in plastic to unwrap it in plastic to use the plastic pen. I mean, I don't need, they wrap fruit and stuff in plastic in Japan. It comes with a cover, right? It's like free cover. You don't need to put plastic on a fruit. So we really have to stop the insanity, come up with solutions that are sustainable, in fact, even better, regenerative, and really take the bull by the horns and change the world for the better right now.
Yeah, and look, I fully agree with you that technology and innovation has a huge potential to do that. And I also agree with you in terms of the geographic and racial diversity in venture capital. I mean, I may be a white male, but I'm not a white male from the US. And I can tell you that I've spent, a number of times during my career, I've tried to get into venture capital, and it's always been a very closed shop. And I've also been involved in a number of entrepreneurial ventures. And so I know how difficult it is to raise capital, even when you've got a great business or a great idea. So I'm certainly with you on those fronts. And it seems to me like you sort of first took aim at the problem that you perceived with entrepreneurs and the things that entrepreneurs were going after with Founders Institute. And then when you made enough of a dent on that problem, I mean, not that, Founders Institute is obviously still running, and it's being run by Jonathan now, I believe.
Yeah.
Then you decided you were going to go after the funding problem. Is that the kind of the...
I mean, I've worked on them both simultaneously for a long time. I would argue I technically started with the funding problem because the first thing I started was the funded. And then what I realized was, so the exact order of events was the investors were really poorly behaved on every level. In the sort of 2000 to 2010 was probably the darkest time in both entrepreneurship and venture capital in history. Obviously come 2008, 2009, 2010, it was like a classic bell curve, right? The bottom of the bell curve was probably like 2003, 2004. Right. 2002 was certainly also a pretty terrible year. And it started coming out of that in, 2008, 2009. And by 2010, we were kind of out of it. But really what happened is all these investors basically were really acting badly. They were doing things that were unscrupulous, asking for incredibly unfair and unreasonable terms from entrepreneurs, unethical behavior, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what ended up happening is, like, if you were a successful entrepreneur and you got to a Series B, you might be asked to do a 5X participating preferred. And what that means is that the investor needs to get 5X their money out before you get anything. And as an entrepreneur in that time, like, you're looking at this and you're like, look, in my worst case scenario, I make nothing. In my middle case scenario, I make nothing. In a good case scenario, I make a little bit of money. The only place where I can really make any money is in like an absolute home run that it was like one in a few thousand at that time. And so it made the game of entering the market unpleasant.
Yeah, I suppose that kind of imbalance of power between capital and entrepreneurs was actually a real disincentive for people to actually get involved and start things. And so I think certainly what we did seem to see during that period, in the US at least, was a bit of a shift of power, or power start to shift away from, the traditional sources of funding, VCs and larger investors to some of the sort of new money, the angel investors and the entrepreneurs that had made money in businesses. And certainly there are some interesting funding stories around that time in terms of entrepreneurs that refused to deal with VCs. Facebook, I think, is probably one of the most famous examples. But did you sort of see at that point the tide start to turn a little?
Yeah, I wanted to fix that. Basically, what I saw was that this imbalance where the venture capitalists were being unfair to entrepreneurs scared entrepreneurs out of the market. So I launched a site called The Funded, which allowed entrepreneurs to rate their venture capital investors.
Yeah.
Now, everyone was anonymous. So you could see who the investor was, of course, because they were being rated. But if you came as an entrepreneur and wrote a rating, you would do it anonymously.
And I understand you keep yourself anonymous as well at the time for a while.
Yeah, well, I know for a fact that some people discussed so far as hiring a hitman to take care of me.
Wow.
They told me this many years later because it was a real problem for a lot of VCs because they would do things like not show up to meetings, kick founders out of meetings, not pay attention in meetings. Those were the good things. There were all sorts of sexual harassment allegations on the site.
Wow.
Unfair business practices where they would give you a term sheet, but then pull out at the last minute after diligence and sort of push you into or negotiate the terms down at the very end kind of randomly. So this was patternistic. So some firms would issue a term sheet, go through 2 months of diligence, wait till you were on the precipice of being out of money, and then change the terms. And they did that over and over again.
Do you think that those practices are largely being stamped out? Do you think people are still doing that stuff?
All those ended. The Funded ended it all because whenever that happened, an entrepreneur would get really mad. They would go to The Funded. They would post an anonymous review. And then after 3 or 4 reviews by different anonymous users that this was happening at a firm, the firm was in deep trouble.
Right.
Right.
People just wouldn't deal with it.
So basically, we had a rating system and entrepreneurs would say, look, I'm not going to pitch. It was out of 5. I'm not going to pitch anyone who's, let's say, below a 3. And if you're doing that type of behavior, your ratings were pretty low. I mean, there were people rated in the 1s.
Yeah.
So that's not great. And so they really, now and back then we were fully indexed by Google, et cetera. So it would come up that such fund was rated a 1 point something. So you'd be like, and may I add, a lot of these funds and firms didn't even have a website. So the only place that you could find out anything about them was on The Funded. So that really did change the venture capital industry. But as I changed the venture capital industry, I realized, wait a minute, there's another issue here. Because thousands of entrepreneurs, we had 25,000 entrepreneurs in the system, but we had tens of thousands more who applied. And what I would do is I would review every entrepreneur before I let them in because I wanted it to be a community of real venture fundable entrepreneurs, not just a bunch of people who were there whining and moaning, but they didn't really have a venture scale business. And I saw that, oh my God, look, there's tens of thousands of people a year who want to start businesses that really are not thinking clearly about how to do it. So that was the genesis of the Founder Institute, was we fixed funding for qualified entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
At least they're not doing all these bad practices. And now we realize on the other side, there's tens of thousands of people who want to be entrepreneurs. They're just not working on things that matter or can be venture scale. So that was the genesis of the Founder Institute, that we would help people at the idea stage to work on venture scale businesses. And, look, we spread entrepreneurship all around the world, literally everywhere. So we are in roughly 300 cities. The pandemic made things weird because we used to be physically in every city, and now we're sort of a blend. Then we went all virtual and we blew up, right? And during the pandemic, and now we're sort of half physical, half virtual. But the Founder Institute was started in 2009 and literally brought entrepreneurship into, many, many countries all around the world. We were often the first accelerator in most places, in most countries like Colombia, Chile, whatever.
Yeah.
And then, so it blew entrepreneurship up in a meaningful way. But then that presented another problem, because while I had fixed venture, and venture was for the most part doing better, it remained largely male, largely white, and largely concentrated in a few cities around the world that I can literally name on one hand. And so after we helped entrepreneurship spread and become meaningful, we realized we had another problem, which was that there just wasn't the right volume of venture capital firms in the world to service the quality of entrepreneurs that were being created worldwide.
Yeah, so I guess in a way this is kind of like a three-stage process. You initially went after some pretty fundamental problems with the conduct of the venture capital industry, and once you'd seen that start to change, you leveraged off that with the connections that you'd made with the entrepreneurs that you're working with to actually help them, focus and develop their businesses. And once that problem was at least maybe not solved, but at least you had an initiative underway to do it, then the next thing was to do the same thing with venture capital. And certainly, I'm a great believer in the power that venture capital has to transform economies, to transform people's lives, and actually to deliver technological change that can change the tangent that we're on. The one thing that I would say, and actually, Adeo, you and I are of a similar age. In fact, I think I'm slightly older than you. So I was at university at a similar time, and I suppose we've sort of seen the tech industry and other industries evolve as we've gone through the respective things that we've done. But I think there are problems. We've always had problems in the world, but I certainly believe that if technology and innovation is applied in the right way, it has the potential to create tangents that can just completely change the course, that humanity is going. And so, for example, nuclear fusion, if we could solve that problem, it could put an end to the climate crisis, not overnight, but it's potentially a form of energy which is
renewables in general, right?
Yeah, for definitely. Yeah. And so I agree that technology has a really important part to play, but it's the way in which that technology and innovation is used that's important. And I think it's certainly from my perspective, I'm all about trying to see it used in a way that has a positive impact in the world. And I think so are you.
I consider myself a societal engineer. Like, I like to think about society and what you can do to change it. And as you were indicating, there's this sort of I call it shimmying up a flagpole. It's like or it's almost like a seesaw. You sort of make a little bit of progress here, and then you got to make some progress in another area. Then you got to make some progress. And then by the end, you kind of get to the top, right? So, consumer behavior, that's a little bit trickier to change. But if you have an electric car that's cheaper, faster, better, and lasts longer with less maintenance, etc., eventually electric cars are going to win, right? Because it's like, why would I buy that expensive thing that breaks all the time and, it is harder to insure, blah, blah, blah. You're going to buy the cheaper thing that, doesn't break all the time, etc., right? So what I want, the way that I see changing behavior right now is to fund things that are just not only better, but also cheaper, right? So like synthetic meats are a great example. meat in general is really just almost the worst thing you could do for the planet. I mean, it's bad in so many ways. I don't even know where to begin. It's like bad for you. Okay, let's start there. It's terribly sad and bad for the animal. Okay, let's go there. It's pretty damn horrible then how it gets transported around and manufactured, just burns tons of energy, right? So there's no win here. There's no like what?
It's true that cows are one of the biggest producers of greenhouse gases as well. So no, I'm very much with you on that.
Yeah, and then some of the animals are actually contributors to the problem.
Yeah.
And then so like synthetic meats, there's like, you know, Beyond Burgers taste better than real. My kids like them better than real burgers. I like them better than real burgers. They are better than real burgers. Now, look, it's not, they're wrapped in plastic. You know, I'm like, I get it, you know, solve one problem, not 10 problems. But I mean, so if you can get to something that tastes better, has the same nutrition, and is less dangerous for the planet, it's going to win, right? Just because, especially if it's cheaper.
Fully agree.
Right?
And look,
right now,
it's all about the business models. I fully agree. Look, one of the companies that I have in my portfolio is a company that does 3D printed construction using recycled polymer plastics. They're based just outside LA. And so they're pulling plastic out of the environment to print structures, but they can actually they can 3D print a completed structure in 24 hours, have it delivered to somebody within a week. And it's actually cheaper than constructing from scratch on site. So, you know, if you can find business models like that, which are actually positive for the environment, and at the same time they're serving a consumer need, then there's a huge amount of power in them. I fully agree.
It's underway now. There's no question this is happening. But, you know, that company, I'm going to guess, to get to any sort of scale is probably going to need $30 to $50 million in a factory, right?
Well,
because that's what like a factory kind of costs.
Ultimately, more than that. Ultimately, they're going to need probably 50 factories in the US and you know, many more internationally. But it's the technology that's driving.
But by the time you get to that scale, right? So funding isn't like, oh, let's give you the 180 million you need to get 10 factories. You scale in increments, and usually to get to like a point where you're viable enough for, let's say, an IPO or something like that, you maybe need 1 or 2 factories, and maybe it's a little more than 50 million, but you could probably get there with $50 million, right?
Yeah,
and then you can look at public markets or even, you know, bank financing at that point. But back to if they don't raise that money, they're never going to get there. It's that simple. And so they may have the best technology, and it may even be cheaper, but they wouldn't be able to service the demand unless they got the money to build the stuff, which is this chicken and egg problem. And I see that type of scenario, Evan, everywhere in the world. There are angels in all markets in the world today, right? And those angels get you a little higher, right? But then no matter what, if you really want to get to the like scale of maybe even going public or something like that, you need the VCs, and there's a definite huge glass ceiling everywhere in the world.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, it is easier to raise funding in the US than, say, in the UK, and it's easier in the UK than it is in Europe, and it's easier in Europe than it is in Asia and Africa. But certainly, you know, it's definitely the case that where the venture markets are better developed, there's more entrepreneurship because there's more funding available. Yeah.
Not only that, there is very clear data where the venture markets are operating. There are disproportionately more unicorns. And of course, you could say, well, of course there's more unicorns because there's more money going into companies to make them unicorns. And that's also true. Like, you know, if you take in lots of money, your valuation is going to go up for sure. But, you know, everywhere in the world needs incumbents. Everywhere in the world has problems. Let's start there. Everywhere in the world needs incumbents to be disrupted because the incumbents are a part of the problem for the most part, right? Some are not, but most are. So we need to disrupt the incumbents. And in many places, the incumbents are multi-billion-dollar businesses, right? So these are pretty much everywhere in the world, every country in the world, right this moment has multi-billion-dollar opportunities ready to be pursued with a real shot of success, because they need to disrupt the traditional firms that are doing things inefficiently, ineffectively, incorrectly, and frankly damaging the planet.
Well, it's about having an ecosystem that's able to do that as well, I think. And I guess
well, I think the entrepreneurs are there. They want to do it. And frankly, the one thing that's been really nice is America is showing the world how to do this. Okay? We're midstream on disrupting all inefficient and damaging businesses for the planet, one by one. Now, some faster than others, but it's happening here. So if you live in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America, and the Middle East, and you want to say, how do I disrupt the telco, or how do I disrupt the car company, or how do I, you just need to look to America, and we're going to have lots of examples of banks being disrupted, real estate's being disrupted, everything's being disrupted. And you can just copy it, okay, in your own country and win. So you don't need to write the playbook. You can copy the playbook, be the disruptor. The problem is there's no venture capital.
Well, and that is the difficulty. I mean, but I guess also, there are models that work in some places that maybe wouldn't work in the US or haven't worked in the US because the business M-Pesa system in Kenya, for example, because everyone was so exposed to mobiles. But I agree, it's a great source of inspiration. Adeo, just changing track for a minute because I'm conscious of time. I wanted to talk a little bit about you and Elon Musk. You were, I understand, housemates at university together, and I understand you also gave him the idea to start SpaceX, and you visited Russia with him in 2001 to try and buy a rocket. So I guess you know him pretty well. I wanted to ask, how did the friendship originally come about, and how did it evolve, and what's made it sort of stay and be strong over the years?
So look, we were both transfer students. So I met him as a transfer student in Japan. I transferred from Carnegie Mellon. He transferred from Canadian College. So I transferred from Carnegie Mellon, and he transferred from Canada.
Right.
And so we were living in freshman dorms, even though we were sophomores. And it was I found it quite unpleasant. So I was like, how can I get out of this dorm as quickly as possible?
Right.
So I started going around and asking people, hey, because you kind of automatically get put into the dorms. And unfortunately what happens is right after school starts, like all the housing around campus gets booked up. And so the only things that weren't booked up were these like large houses. And so I was like, I have an idea. I'll just go and take one of these large houses and I'll start a nightclub, but I need to have someone else to help me. So Elon, I was the only person who agreed to come with us and do this. We eventually found a third person named Hal, and then we opened up this nightclub in our house to get out of the freshman dorms because, and then we did it the next year because we kind of figured it was an easy way to make living money during college. You would charge $5 and have a keg of beer, and you might have a few hundred people a night come by. So, the margins were pretty good.
So how old were you guys when you were doing this? Early 20s?
Maybe not drinking age. I don't remember. Okay. Probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did it make enough to cover the rent?
Oh yeah, we did pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in a way
we did. I mean, it wasn't big money. We weren't rolling around and, we didn't get a car or anything like that from it, but we certainly we lived large for, relatively poor college kids. So we could go to dinner at like somewhat nice restaurants every once in a while, and we could afford to, go to an all-you-could-eat buffet if we wanted to. So, there was, again, it wasn't like lots of money, but it was enough money to cover some expenses, help cover rent, and even cover some school costs. So it was a fun way to have a business in college and a job in college.
That's a great way to get by. I worked at McDonald's when I was at university, so it doesn't sound as much fun as what you were doing.
It's better than working at McDonald's, I'll tell you that. I can imagine. But it wasn't. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't without its problems for sure. I mean, we definitely had issues. I had to hire policemen who were off duty to be the security so that we didn't have problems with the police. And we didn't really have problems with the police, thankfully. Maybe because we hired the off-duty police. So like it wasn't super easy. But it was definitely fun. And yeah, so then we've just, look, I was super successful. Interestingly enough, I was more successful than he was successful for a long time. And then that changed. And now it's like, I think it's been about 10 years where I'm like, there's just no way I'll ever catch up. But I'm not doing it so he's really doing this to make a lot of money so he can do our private Mars mission. And because that's the only way we're going to colonize Mars. We came to this conclusion many years ago. So we've been friends for a long time. And, I'm probably one of the only friends that hasn't really been with Elon to make money. I consider him generally a friend. I haven't really invested in anything he's done. So I would say it's friendship first, and actually friendship period. And I'm happy. I do support him. I just bought a new Tesla, for an example, but so I do support him because I believe in the things that he does, but it's not about money for me. It's about friendship first. And back to the Mars stuff. So we started a company to look at really sending humanity to space, with really the destination being Mars. And it was called Life to Mars was the name of the company. And Life to Mars,
sort of a predecessor to SpaceX in a way.
So it became SpaceX essentially, because in order to send stuff to Mars, you need a pretty big rocket. In order to get a big rocket, you didn't have that many options at the time. It was, the US was launching the shuttle, so that wasn't going to happen. You had Kinéis and Ariane, which was doing the Ariane 5. And then you had pretty much the Russians, and they had the Soyuz, but they also had some ICBMs for sale. So we went around everywhere. We figured out we were going to launch. Originally, someone's like, you should do a mouse to Mars. And we're like, we're not sending mice to Mars. But we're going to send plants to Mars and grow them natively on Mars' surface to show that you could have life on Mars, aka the name of the company. But our ultimate goal was human life on Mars. So make a long story short, we bought some ICBMs from Russia, and they basically tripled the price on us. So our $14 million, we were going to buy two, one at the beginning of the launch window, one at the end of the launch window. And then as they went up, we assumed the first one would fail. We could get some data from it, figure out why it failed. And then within the few month launch window, it's like 2-3 months, hopefully we would be able to we'd have another one ready. We could fix the things that broke and get a launch in the launch window. So that was about, as I said, 14 million, 7 million each. We were buying SS-18 NATO designated Satan rockets. And when I didn't really enjoy my time in Russia very much. So I was like, I don't want to go back. And Elon's like, well, I'll go back because we need to go back and finalize some details. And he came back and he was really, really angry. They had tripled the price. So it went from 7 million to 21 million, which is insane. Right. And then, our launch cost went from 14 million to 42 million. And we had, I think our total budget was like 50, 60 million. This is like 20 something years ago. And so I was like, okay, I'm happy to go halvesies on that. But when it started to get to like 75 to 100 million, I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't have that kind of money. I don't think you have that kind of money. So, and he's like, and he made the decision to be like, I'm going to start a rocket company. And I actually held an intervention, where I brought in the top rocket scientists and people who've launched stuff to Mars, like Tony Spear, Peter Diamandis, and they were all like, you cannot do this. It's a terrible idea. You make a small fortune in space by starting with a large one. So you got to really, and so I remember distinctly after the intervention, he came up to me. He's like, I'm going to do it anyway. And I'm like, all right, I have your back. And that was the genesis of SpaceX.
So you guys went out to Russia together. You negotiated a deal for these 3 rockets, and the Russians were going to launch them for you, were they, as well? That was 2 rockets.
2 rockets.
And they gave you a price for launching them too.
Yeah. Obviously, they changed the price. Sort of like prices in Mexico. You know, never know where they're going to be, but you got to negotiate the whole time.
You had this all agreed, but it actually none of it ever actually went ahead because they basically changed the parameters.
Well, we learned a lot. I mean, so there was a lot of value out of it. I mean, we actually planned pretty far along a full mission to Mars. So there's NATO issues around ITAR and other things that, and ITAR is you can't have security, sensitive stuff with potential enemies. So because of ITAR, like we couldn't really know all that much about how their rocket worked, and they couldn't really know very much about how our payload worked. So basically you take payload, put on rocket, and hope for the best. That's why we bought 2. So there, you could know some things like how the connectors worked and but really like they couldn't know really anything. So we had to, it was quite a complicated
technology transfer, right? They just,
no, there's no tech transfer. It would be a black box on a black box shot into space. So it had pretty low chances of success. That's why we bought 2. Frankly, we should have bought 3, but we just didn't have the money. I think if we had 3, our probability of success would be like 90%. At 1, it's like 5%. At 2, maybe 60%. But it was not so much whether it happened or whether we got it working or the actual stuff grew on Mars. We just wanted to show the world, guys, like we got to do things that matter, right? We got to start working on things that matter. Like if we don't start living on, I mean, I was just down at Mexico in Tulum, and there's these things called cenotes, and they're like holes in the
big holes in the ground that people dive in.
Water. Yeah. You know what they're formed from? Pieces of the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs broke off, and other things got shot out of the ground and flew in the air and landed and put giant holes in the ground. And that's what cenotes are. And the whole gulf there is where the asteroid that wiped the dinosaurs out. It's not even the largest crater on Earth. It's the second largest crater on Earth. And it wiped out the dinosaurs. And here we're living on this planet like do-de-do, and it could be any day, any week, any year. Oh, look, there's a big one. It's going to get really close. And if it hits, we're gone. There's no way we would survive it. No way. Right. And so like the idea that we have the knowledge and the technology to do something so that we can back up the biosphere, get ourselves on another planet and have a shot of surviving in a catastrophic event, and we're not doing it, is insane. It doesn't even make sense. And the fact that it takes one private individual to do that is also insane. So, you know, I'm definitely helping, because what else are you going to, we got to fix the problems of the planet, but we can't fix a giant asteroid heading to the planet. Like, we don't have the tech to do that, but we do have the tech to get people off the planet to Mars right now, even without Elon's thing.
We're going to run out of space on this planet too. So at some point, sooner or later, you're right.
Well, look, we're not going to, no, the way we're living like idiots, we're going to run out of space on the planet. But if we live intelligently and we do things right, we don't have to run out of space. I mean, we build roads so that we can live in remote areas and drive an hour or two to work. That doesn't make any sense. Why are we doing that? And then the road kills tons of stuff. The remote area housing kills tons of stuff. We're just not being smart. But I do think we can fix it all. And I don't think it's like, look, I'm going to make things pretty black and white. You know, there was a day, I think it was yesterday, where it was 38 degrees Celsius warmer than average on the poles. Now, but you take that, now the poles are really cold, right? So a 38 degrees Celsius differential may still even be below freezing, right? But you take that 38 degrees Celsius differential and you move it anywhere else in the world, we would be like roasted. Okay. There's no amount of air conditioning that would protect you. You would die. All right. And so we're starting to see like crazy temperatures all around the world. You know, sea levels are we really need to do something. You know, if you ask me what I think the time frame is that we have to fix things, I think it's in the, 6 to 10 years. We have to live completely differently. And that's the time frame we have to change.
Well, look, who knows what the future is going to bring, but I think the only thing that we can do is we can do our own parts in trying to bring change and trying to make positive change. And it's certainly clear to me that is the direction that you're heading in. It's certainly the direction that I'm wanting to head in with the investments that I'm making in my venture capital firm. I want to be respectful of your time. I think you've got a hard stop fairly soon. And so just to kind of bring things to a close, just want to ask you a question. And I think in a way I know how you might answer this, but let's just imagine that for a minute that everyone in the world is on X, formerly Twitter, and they all follow you, but you can only tweet once a year. So you've got an opportunity to get a message out to the whole world. What is it that you would say?
The world is on fire. We got to act.
Okay.
Action comes individually. Action comes collectively. You cannot say you care about the environment and continue to buy single-use plastic stuff all the time. You cannot say you care about the environment and drive a car that combusts. You cannot say that you care about the environment and fly around the world recklessly many times a year. Like, and look, I'm not perfect. Okay. I'm not trying to say that I'm perfect, but I've got one gas car left and it's going. I buy all my food at the farmer's market for the week, with the exception of some things that they just don't have there. And I bring my own bags and all that. And I try not to travel. I'll do no more than 5 trips this year. That's my hard limit. I did hopefully a lot less, right? I just did a trip that was planned for a long time for my birthday. I did a ski trip for my friend's 50th birthday. So that's 2. I'm going to do something with the kids over the summer. That's 3. And I might do a speaking gig, maybe 4. So,
and I know that you walk the walk, Adeo, from my own personal experience of you and from the things that you and I have been involved in. So
it all adds up, right? We each are the problem. You can't blame the government. You can't blame the person, if you're buying stuff that has plastic in it, it's not the person selling you plastic that's the problem. It's you, right? Just buy something that doesn't have plastic.
So if we were going to condense all that to a 280 character tweet, it will probably be the world's on fire. You need to do your bit.
Well, you need to act. Yeah.
You need to act.
I do see the soft landing here, though. And the soft landing is just replace everything that people are doing today, whether it's fast fashion, eating meat, buying stuff wrapped in reusable plastics, travel or whatever, with things that can achieve the same result, be less expensive, and generally better for the environment or even regenerative, right? Mm. And I think that is an achievable goal by 2030, so that you buy compostable fast fashion. It doesn't, you can just, it's not made with synthetics, whatever. It's fast fashion, but you can compost it, right? And I can just go on. Like, you're not eating meat 3 times a day, 7 days a week. Maybe you have meat once a week and you eat synthetic alternatives the rest of the time. So there'll be solutions. And instead of everything being wrapped in plastic, maybe there's, again, compostable packaging that can be used easily by people, replacing the plastic alternatives. And so I really we're almost there. Hmm. And then once the fire is out, we need to say, where do we collectively want to go? And, one of the places we're going to be is Mars. We will be living on Mars around the time that we pull this down. And, it's an area that I think about a lot, which is, what do we want our future generations on a new planet? What does their life look like? What are their values and beliefs? And how do they avoid the mistakes that we've made here? And in some ways, they're going to have to, because you can't have landfill on Mars, right? You're going to have to reduce, reuse, recycle everything you have. Right? You're going to be drinking your urine. You're going to be eating from your waste.
Hopefully not directly.
Well, filtered, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
but you're right.
There is water on Mars.
We are going to have to solve some of these problems and actually apply them in order to actually live somewhere like Mars. It's, there are lots of issues that we don't have to confront here that we're going to have to deal with when we get there. Well, listen, Adeo, we're running up to your your next appointment, so I don't want to hold you up. Thank you very much for your time today. It's been a really interesting conversation. I think we've talked about a lot of different things, and I think for me it's been really interesting, and just to kind of get to know you a little bit better as a person. I
really enjoyed the conversation, Evan. Thank you so much for making the time.
Yeah, it's been a real pleasure, and thank you for your time.